Okay, thank you all for joining us for this 2021 Student Symposium Continuing Education Seminar titled Email Etiquette. Before we start, please let me share a few technical instructions with you. If you are having any technical problems, please visit Zoom support at support.zoom.us or type your question in the chat box. A recording of this seminar without permission from ASCE Texas section is prohibited, and all participants are muted throughout the duration of the seminar. If you have any questions, please feel free to type them in the chat box in your control panel, and our speakers are actually going to be answering questions throughout the seminar, so we encourage you to use that chat box to ask questions along the way. Now, a quick message from 2021 Student Symposium Advocate, Civil Tech, a Woolpert company.
Engineering at Woolpert is industry leading just for the sheer fact of how much technology is involved in what we do. We have the latest and greatest technology, and we're constantly looking for new ways to apply that technology. The majority of us at Woolpert are problem solvers, so it's sort of a inherent nature of being a Woolpie.
So Woolpert engineers, we come from many different backgrounds. We have civil, structural, mechanical, electrical, fire protection, plumbing, all the guts of a building. We also have sustainability and planners, and those are the engineers that really think big picture for our communities.
Woolpert is involved in so many cool projects. We have so many of the latest cutting edge tools, and we're constantly working on implementing that technology in new ways.
So really engineering is a way that I can get all of my ideas and my creativity onto paper and into drawings where they can really come to life.
Woolpert is a bunch of problem solvers. In most cases, if you don't have the answer, there's somebody at Woolpert that does. And so there's a constant ability to learn, the ability to sort of meet with subject matter experts that have knowledge in places that I don't is really attractive. You know, it's just a cool place to be.
Thank you to those supporters. Now I'm pleased to introduce our presenters, Lindsay O'Leary and Mike Sosa from ASCE Texas section. Lindsay serves as the Executive Director for the ASCE Texas section. She began this full-time role in November 2016 and has since been devoted to the advancement of the civil engineering profession, the leadership of the section, and growing the membership of the section's 15 branches. She regularly works with the section's board of direction and executive committee to implement the strategic plan and ensure the section continues to be one of the most active sections of ASCE. Prior to working with ASCE Texas section, Mrs. O'Leary worked in the fields of civil and environmental engineering for 10 years. She is a licensed professional engineer in the state of Texas, a certified association executive, and a lead accredited professional. Mike joined ASCE Texas section in June of 2017. He is a very detail-oriented, and he has prior experience working with member-driven associations. Prior to joining ASCE Texas section, he spent time working as an executive assistant for companies located in Columbus, Ohio, and San Diego, California. He is a 2010 graduate of the College of Business at Ohio University with a BS in sport administration and a minor in business. The floor is yours, Lindsay and Mike.
Thank you, Tricia. We appreciate it. All right, bear with me. I've got the presentation mode on my main screen that I'm sharing and the upcoming slides on my other screen. So I will try to focus on you all today. So you heard from Tricia. We appreciate the introduction. I thought it would be fun to share a photo of the last time we were at the Student Symposium. We miss seeing everybody in person this year, but we're happy to be able to be together virtually, and we appreciate your time this afternoon for one of my favorite subjects, email etiquette. Before we get started, I definitely want to thank our sponsors, and I want to thank Mike too for our staff member who's been coordinating with all the sponsors. Mike, we really appreciate your help on that. Thumbs up coming from Mike.
Very
All
welcome.
right. Okay, so to keep things interactive today, we thought we wanted to ask you all a few questions first. So we are going to try out a Zoom poll. So let me go ahead and get that going. Oh, Mike, you've got it going. Awesome, thank you. It helps to tag team, it really does. So all of the attendees should be able to answer the poll that we've got up for you. We've got a couple of questions and we're going to touch on these questions throughout the presentation today. I suppose we can leave this open as we get started.
That works.
Okay, wonderful. So for today's presentation, we are going to cover a number of things. Let me get these screens out of my way. Sorry about that, y'all. We really want to talk about communication. That's why we're here today. And communication comes in a variety of factors. Once you become an engineer working full-time or part-time, you will be doing emails, you'll have voicemails, you'll have letters, yes, old school letters that we send by snail mail. You'll absolutely be using LinkedIn. I see so many of the Texas section board members, professionals across Texas who are using LinkedIn all of the time. It's the place to be for professional networking online. And all of that communication can be a little bit overwhelming. So we hope today, by the end of our session, you'll feel a little bit more comfortable with email in particular, and we will touch on a few other forms of communication as well. We'll also help give you tricks like, when do I just pick up the phone? When is the best time to go ahead and do that? And a key takeaway for us here is, no matter how great you are at engineering, if you can't clearly communicate your wonderful and brilliant ideas, you won't be successful. So communication is really key. And we wouldn't be able to leave you all without talking a little bit about ASCE. So we'll do that at the end of the presentation.
All right. It looks like we got 6 people that have filled out the poll. So the rest of you, please continue to do that. Before we really get started here, we want to show a quick clip from ASCE's podcast, Plot Points. And then we'll get into talking about some different types of communication.
Ladies and gentlemen, these are dark days for the quiet and shy among us, the social wallflowers. Dark days indeed. Just think about all the different communication skills you need now in order to succeed in your career. So I just made a little list. Feel free to take notes and add some of your own as you will. Writing reports. Talking in front of large groups, talking in front of small groups, knowing which hashtag is funny and which hashtag is embarrassing, generating cool, casual, and interesting topics at networking events, tasteful font selection in your Instagram stories, cell phone cinematography, live tweeting, winning Twitter arguments, translating your message so that 3 different generations at your office can understand what you're talking about, building and updating your catalog of memes, Snapchat filters, making sure your PowerPoint slides don't have too many words on them, emojis, sustaining awkward conversation in the elevator with colleagues. Man, can you believe the weather today out there? It's crazy. Oh, and one more thing. Maybe even hosting and producing a podcast. Let's go.
So as you can see there, the host kind of hits on a whole variety of different communications and different things that people are taking into consideration and thinking about on a daily basis. And now I'll give it back to Lindsay. She'll kind of take you through what some of those regular communications are in a business setting.
Thank you, Mike. Yeah, how to do a plug for the ASCE podcast, Plot Points. I love it. It's such a good podcast. If you are a podcast person, highly recommend it. So in the intro, we talked a little bit about the different types of communications we would cover. Emails are probably going to be your most frequently used communication in the professional workplace. You're going to have regular communications with both your internal teammates and your external clients. So we're going to help you understand how to do those emails effectively today. There will be times where you'll have to make a couple formal letters. Perhaps you'll have a report or a proposal that you want to submit external to the company. So letters have not gone out of style just because we have email. Sometimes it's important to put information together in a slightly more formal format. Phone calls are definitely going to be something you will experience regularly in the engineering world. We recommend using the phone for anything urgent. Let's say you have to change the schedule for a project for a critical path item. So that means this item is key to making the project be completed on time. If that schedule needs to change, and perhaps that change takes place tomorrow, you better pick up the phone and call the appropriate people on the team as opposed to just sending an email. Or perhaps you find out, wow, my budget is significantly changing. Well, you better call the person who's responsible for paying that budget so that they are not caught by surprise. And without a doubt, if there's ever any safety concerns when you're working on a project, please pick up the telephone. It's wonderful to send a follow-up email in addition to those phone calls, but for those urgent priority items, let the telephone be your first go-to form of communication. And of course, you'll have conference calls and Zoom meetings like the one we're doing today. Those can take anywhere from a couple of minutes to an hour or more. I mentioned formal reporting already. And in the professional world, we do use social media. You'll see a lot of engineering companies are active on all the different social media platforms for recruiting and engaging new engineers, potential employees, and also marketing their products and services to clients as well. So social media does exist in the professional workplace, but the key there is keep it professional. I'm going to go to the next slide.
Thank you. All right, so now we'll talk about sort of how you want to communicate within those different methods, email, social media. And really this can apply to non-written communications as well, sort of your in-person conversations with coworkers, phone calls, conference calls. It's really all encompassing. If you're on a business call or sending a business communication, you always want to make sure you're being respectful and professional, regardless of whether it's a superior, an equal, it doesn't matter. You always want to put out the type of communication, the type of respect that you want to get back in return. Going along with that, you never want to quote unquote email angry or email overly emotionally. If you get some bad news or if you get an email that upsets you, take the time that you need to reflect on that, to calm yourself down, to get into a mindset that allows you to send a reply that's going to be productive and allow you to move forward rather than just exacerbating the problem. Don't use humor. This is kind of more for written communications. I guess in the office place as well, you want to be careful with the jokes you're making, obviously. You want to be very sensitive to everyone around you. But especially with emails, messages in Microsoft Teams or Slack, humor is just really hard to pick up on if it's just a written word. So we just recommend trying to avoid that in your professional and business communications. And then these last two, proofreading your message and your email, and really all your communications are a reflection of you. You want to be well-spoken, put together. If you're sending an email, you don't want to have a bunch of typos, weird spacing, not capitalizing certain words. Make sure you take the time to spell check your grammar, make sure the email is well put together, just like you would if you're picking up the phone to call somebody, or if you're in class talking to somebody. You want to make sure you're respectful, you're well thought out when you're speaking. It goes a long way in just elevating your professional appearance. Next slide, please.
Mike, before we go to the next slide, I did see a question in the chat from Trisha, and that's a good reminder for the audience today. We definitely want this to be interactive. So if you have any questions as we're going along, please feel free to put them in the chat and we will try to keep an eye on those. You can also use your raise hand feature in Zoom and we'll try to answer your questions in that way as well. So Trisha asked, What about using Slack or Microsoft Teams in your communications? More and more companies are using those for internal communications. And that's right, we definitely need to update our slides for those. We use Microsoft Teams here at the Texas section office quite frequently, and it is a very helpful tool, definitely for quick answers. Sometimes I prefer email though, because that has a better documentation and easier to search when I need to go back and reference something. So depending on what it is, Teams is an easy, quick tool, so is Slack. But if you want to be able to reference something later, it may be helpful to keep that in an email. Okay, Mike, I'll go to the next slide for you.
Thank you. All right, now everybody's favorite thing in the world. Oh wait, can you go back one slide? Sorry, I think it went twice.
I double clicked, sorry.
No worries. So when to respond. It's always fun when you send off an email to somebody and nothing comes back in. Everybody is busy. You get emails from colleagues, friends, random spam emails. You're on different newsletter lists. You get emails all the time. So when do you respond to what? Good rule of thumb is do reply to all emails. Even if you don't have the answer or if you don't have a lot of time to write a long response back, replying to somebody to let them know that, you know, I got your email and I'm working on this, or if they're sending you a document, letting them know that you received that document is always a good thing to do. If there is confidential material that they're sending you, just make sure you're aware of that and you're not forwarding it to people that the person that sent it to wouldn't want seeing those files. And then you don't really want to overuse exclamation points, capital letters. If it is an urgent request, let's say you have a meeting in an hour and you need something from a colleague, sending them an email with like an all capitals, a bunch of exclamation points, I'm not really sure that that's going to get your point across any better than if you would have just walked down the hall and asked them, or send them a nice friendly, hey, just sending you a reminder, I would like this before the call. It's always better to be nice and respectful rather than try to demand stuff or take things out of context and make it a little more urgent than it needs to be. And when in doubt, pick up the phone. If you're emailing somebody and you're just not hearing back from them over and over, don't be shy, pick up the phone. A lot of times that's a good way to get a hold of people if they're busy with meetings all day or if they're on the road. If they see that phone ring, that might be a good way to get a hold of them rather than just an email. Next slide, please.
I'm also going to share the results of our poll for you, Mike, just because question number 4 had a really great tie-in with what you just went over and shared with us. Our audience largely felt like waiting to respond to an email for 1 week is perhaps a little too long. So let me bring us to the next slide for you to talk about that some more.
Sure. So kind of going off that, yeah, I would say waiting a week is probably too long. You want to try to get to it the same week that you receive it is kind of what I usually try to do. But kind of like I was saying earlier, you might have 10, 20, 50 emails that all need responded to by the end of the week, and there might just not be enough time in the day. So a good thing to do is try to prioritize those. Responding to urgent requests first is a good thing. If it's hard to tell whether a request is urgent or not, try to think about if other people have tasks or action items that are depending on you to get something done. If you're working in a committee, for example, if we're planning this event, a lot of times the rest of the committee will be waiting for 1 or 2 people to get something done, provide an update, and then the whole committee can use that and then get our next task done. So if it's something like that, you want to prioritize that for sure. I think Lindsay mentioned it earlier. For your professional and your career, if there's a deadline, you definitely want to make that a priority. You don't want to make missing deadlines or pushing deadlines a habit. It's stressful for all those involved, including yourself. So if you can avoid that, that's definitely a best practice. And then like I mentioned earlier, if you're not sure or if you're on the road, too busy to respond with a full answer, respond, let the person know you got the email, you're working on the answer, and you'll get back to them in a timely manner. And then the next time you're at your office with some free time, sit down, shoot them a quick email, get them their answer, and then you're all set. Next slide. And it's back to you.
Thank you, Mike. Appreciate those tips. All right, so now let's talk a little bit about, okay, how do you actually create an email? Well, the first part of your email is the subject line, and it is super important. When professionals receive a couple dozen emails every day, scanning subject lines is really going to get their attention if it's something that they need quickly, and it's also going to help them manage whether or not it's a priority. Mike mentioned trying to respond to priority emails first. So when you're trying to help somebody plan their workday or their work week, I know they will appreciate a very clear and concise subject line. So make sure if it's about a project, you include that project name. If it has a deadline, you might want to put that deadline in the subject line. And always proofread your subject line. So I've got a couple of examples here for you. My first example is your Canyon Lake Dam project proposal attached. Well, that's great. I know what project it's for. I'm expecting the proposal. Thank you for sending it. Another subject example is, hey, I would like you to testify on Tuesday. Okay, well, maybe it's Monday and I see, oh gosh, that's tomorrow. And I need to testify for a House bill on this particular infrastructure topic. Wow, I better address this ASAP. So it really helps to have that information clear and concise in the subject line. Another good subject line is action items and notes from a meeting or a call. Okay, I can get to that when I have time. I see there may be a few action items attached, so maybe I'll glance at it before I fully read it and I get back to a different thing I'm working on. A couple other subject lines I have as examples for you. Here's some information about a meeting that's coming up for the ASCE, or International Conference on Sustainable Infrastructure. ASCE has plenty of acronyms that you will get familiar with as you continue your ASCE journey. Okay, and my last subject line example I wanted to share is for review. Here's a design report with some roadway plans for this particular project. So that's great. When I have that email in my inbox, I know, okay, I'm supposed to review that. Thank you for making that very clear. So please change those subject lines and clean them up when you're replying to emails as well. On the bottom of the slides, you'll see that I've got a really, really bad example. Somebody has responded to an email that was forwarded to somebody, and then it was an external correspondence, and all of that REFW external, it takes up space in where I'm reading the subject line. And so if you can clean that up, I'd really appreciate it. And instead say, I have a question about the subject line. Okay, let's go on to the actual body of your email. When you format your email, I highly recommend having a professional greeting, not, hey, what's up? Something nice like, hi, hello, sir, madam, Mr., Mrs., doctor. I think that's very important in a professional workplace. It also allows you to take a moment to greet the person you're sending the email to. And when you're writing that email, again, you want to make it clear and concise by putting information up front. So here I've got a sample email for you that I'm sending to a colleague of ours, Dr. Andre Salazar, and I am being pretty formal. I'm saying good afternoon, letting them know that the client would like our design report by next Friday. So I'm underlining that. I think next Friday is a very important deadline that they need to be aware of. So I've called attention to that in the body of the email by underlining the date. I'm saying, please give me a call so that we can talk about this. Perhaps there's too much information for me to spend time typing in the body of the email. So my first thought is, why don't you give me a call and we'll talk about this further. Then if I have time, I can include some more information, but the important thing is that information is upfront in the first few sentences. There's a deadline. Why don't you give me a call and we'll discuss the possibility of getting this done by the deadline. Towards the end of the email, I may restate my ask, which is, again, please call me. I'll make sure that if I said, please call me, that person has easy access to my telephone number. thank them for their time, and always end with a signature block, which I'll touch on a little bit later. Okay, so now we know how to do a subject line. We know what to put about the body of the email, but what are some other tips you need to know about writing and crafting a really effective email and a good way of communicating with your colleagues, both internal and external? First thing is, don't assume that people know what you're talking about. Like I mentioned, a professional might get dozens of emails in a day, and when reading them quickly, perhaps on their computer or from their phone, they may not have the same background that you have on a particular project. So don't send a one-liner. If somebody asks, should we extend the project schedule? When you respond, don't just say yes or no. Say, yes, I think we should extend the schedule for this reason. Give them some more information. Also, try to keep it clean. Sometimes these emails go back and forth, and there can be several pages or several scrolls of back and forth emails. You can delete some of that information if it's not relevant to the current conversation. That just helps keep everybody's inbox a little bit cleaner. Also, if somebody wants to print an email, it saves some pages as well. If there's a lot of back and forth, you can always feel free to start a new email conversation as well. One thing I really like to do when I keep it clean in my emails is when I'm responding to a group, I might scroll down below and even delete the email addresses of previous correspondence on the email. I might do that for privacy, and I might do that again just to keep it clean so it's not just a giant scrolling wheel of information in my inbox that is no longer applicable. And last but not least, my pet peeve is be sure that you have your automated signature. I'm going to show you some examples in a little bit of what your email signature should look like and the important information that it should include and why it's important.
All right, now we've got a few examples of some good email communications with some tips along the way. This first slide here is sort of keeping it clean to a whole new level. Very simple emails. The one on the left there, somebody's sending in a board report. It's attached to the email. So he's saying, Mike, my board report's attached. Please update the previous one, which lets me know that he had already sent one. Thank you, Larry. He's on with his day. Nice and simple. I got everything I needed. He gave me his report. We're all good. The second one on the right, this is super simple. I would probably only use this if it was somebody that I emailed with on the regular. The subject tells you what it is, and then there's a link to the article, which is about that subject. Next slide, please.
Okay, in this next slide, we get to contact cards. So in using Microsoft Outlook, which I know not everybody is familiar with yet, but I have a feeling once you start your full-time job as an engineer or as a part-time as an intern, you will be using Microsoft Outlook quite regularly. It is really kind when you can give somebody a contact card. Then they can save it in their contacts within their email program, and they don't have to go searching for somebody's information in the future. I really like it because if somebody sends me their contact card, for example, a colleague of mine, Austin Burrell, sent me his contact card, and then another colleague, Art, asked me for Austin's information. So it's very easy for me to say, hey, Art, here's Austin's information. I did copy and paste his signature block from his email within the body of the email. In addition to that, I attached his contact card. So now Art can save it in his contacts folder and contact Austin at his convenience. So I think that's just a kind, polite thing to do. It's almost like giving somebody your electronic business card. Okay, I promised my pet peeve, email signature blocks. Okay, so tell me a little bit about the email on the right. It's pretty short, right? It says, hey, I sent you some files. Thanks, LOL. What's the subject line? Need help. I can't stand this type of email because what if I don't know who this person is? And their subject line says need help. I'm going to look at that pretty quickly, but I might be really busy. I wish they would have told me in the subject line, what do they need help with? And also, hey is pretty informal. I sent you some files. Did you get them? Well, what kind of files did you send me? Could you elaborate? You know, I sent you the roadway plans for this particular project, or I sent you the files for the upcoming conference. Did you see the schedule that I attached? That would be really helpful to elaborate a little bit. This goes back to what we talked about earlier in not assuming. And also, if I wanted to contact this person that needs help, I can only email them in response. I do not see their signature block, and therefore I couldn't pick up the phone and call them. If it is something urgent, that's a best practice, is giving them a phone call. So over on the left, here's an example of my signature block, which is maybe a little bit longer than others needs to be. I've got the Texas section logo thrown in there, and I also include our social media channels. But most importantly, it has my full contact information. It has my mailing address, my direct telephone number at the office, my cell phone number or my mobile number, my email, the website for ASCE Texas section. And I like to include this so that if somebody needs to get a hold of me by phone, they have this information. If they want to introduce me to somebody, they have the proper spelling of my name and my credentials. And that's very easy to share this information with other people.
All right, so here we've got kind of just a reminder of a couple of the tips that we've mentioned. Acknowledge the info you receive. So if somebody sends you an email with a report or a question, like I said, if you don't have time, just send them an email, let them know that you got that information and that you will get back to them. One last reminder, I think there might be more about including your signature block. So please, please, please make sure you set up those signature blocks. And then the one on the left, important info up front. If you've got a relatively long email with a lot of things to say, we do this a lot with our board meetings or committee meetings. We'll take out the important information or the action items and move those up to the very front of the email. So those people that may be a little busy, may not want to read through the full email or the full notes, they at least have those action items right at the front. They know what they need to do to keep everything moving along smoothly. Next slide. What happens if no one responds? Next slide, please.
Mike, I was going to pull those poll results up again real quick, just so we can see. So we asked everybody, what if you send an email, an important email, and you didn't receive a response? And 50% of our attendees said send a second email, and 50% said call them directly.
And that may be a little personal preference. I know some people just do not like the idea of picking up the phone and calling people. If that's you, a second email is totally fine. It may get to a point where you need to pick up the phone and call them, but 2 emails is definitely fine. Like it says here, if it's an urgent item, wait, try to give at least a day or 2 notice ahead of time, so that way you have a chance to remind them again before the deadline. Don't be emailing them at 9 a.m. saying, hey, can you get this to me? And then at noon, you're saying, hey, can I get this? And then 3 p.m., hey, where is it? That's just, your coworkers are going to be mad at you. You're still not going to have the thing any sooner by doing that. So just try to avoid that if you can. Don't be shy though. If it does get to a point, you've given them proper notice, you sent your reminders, send them that reminder email. If you still don't hear back, go down the hall and get them, give them a call. If you need something from them, you're more than allowed to call somebody. They're not going to be offended. Sometimes people just don't see their emails. They've got too many emails, and as soon as they see that phone ring, they'll be like, oh, wow, I totally forgot about this. Yes, let me get this to you right away. And that last one there, if it does get to the point where you are emailing, you're calling, you're not hearing back, go to your supervisor, go to your teammates, tell them what's going on, see if you can get them to help you brainstorm ways to either get in touch with the person or find an alternative solution. Next slide.
Thanks, Mike.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, another topic for everybody. There will be a time in your career where you have to send a company-wide message. So if you happen to work in a company of, I don't know, let's say 1,200 employees, that's really intimidating, right? Like, I don't want to do that. I don't want to email 1,200 people. What if I do something wrong? So there are a couple of things that go along with a group email. It might be 1,200, it might be 20. It can still be intimidating to send a big group email. So we have some tips for you on that. We highly recommend using the blind carbon copy or BCC line to prevent people from replying all. I'm curious if people have been on that email where people respond and respond again and all this back and forth. And before you know it, you check your emails and you've missed 20 emails in a single conversation. So a good tip for that is to make sure if you put people in the BCC line, if one person responds, they respond to the sender directly and they're not able to respond to all the other recipients. So we do this a lot with communication here at ASCE Texas section. We'll put people in the blind carbon copy line, and that's a polite thing to do. And it also prevents you sending that company-wide email and somebody asking a question that then goes to the entire company, taking up space and time in everybody's inbox. If you do have to send that company-wide email, another great tip is proofreading it at least twice. And you might ask a coworker to do a peer review of your email. Sometimes when you have a spelling error, you don't realize it, it reads clearly in your head, or a grammatical error, you might go over that a couple times and not notice it. So it's always nice to have a second set of eyes. If you're sending something that's formal to a big group, don't be shy. Ask a friend, a colleague to help you out and say, hey, would you just come read this real quick and make sure I didn't miss anything? I don't want to send something embarrassing to this big group of people. When you are sending those long emails, do try to keep them short as possible and be polite, because people are going to see that and it's going to be in their inbox if they want to go back and reference it. And again, do not forget to include your signature block so that if somebody does have a question, they know all the appropriate ways they can get in touch with you. Okay, so we keep talking about email and how that's the primary form of communication in the professional workplace, and it really is. There's a study that shows workers spend about 28% of their work week reading and answering emails. That's a lot of time. That's a lot of productivity. And if you're looking at emails that are unclear or those reply all responses that are clogging up your inbox, you're going to lose even more time from your day. So be polite, help each other out, and make sure that everybody is being as effective as possible. And we're not saying don't send emails, because you have to communicate. Just communicate clearly and concisely. Clear is kind. Okay, I'm going to scare everybody right now. Welcome to the world of Lindsay. One thing I love is folders. That's a personal preference. I love putting things in folders within my email inbox. So just on a typical day, this is what my inbox looks like. Everybody is going to manage their inbox a little bit differently. They might even have the views shown differently. They might not do the email preview pane like I do. Here, kind of towards the middle on the right, you can actually see the email itself. And on the left side of that, you see each individual email. Some people don't like to see the preview. I do. It helps me go through my inbox a little bit quicker. I also like to have my calendar view on the right side, the very right side of my email, so I can see what's coming up for the week and what I'm going to be working on. You'll notice things are different colors. I like to use color coding. That's a form of organization I appreciate. That doesn't always work for everybody. And then on the very left side of the screen is my email inbox and all of my subfolders. And so that's where I think you guys might be laughing at me a little bit. I like to use subfolders to keep it organized. If I get an email that I want to save, but I don't necessarily need to keep in my inbox, I'll drag it into a subfolder. In my list of incoming emails, you'll also see the colors again and the flags. I like to keep things flagged so that when they're done, I can check them off and move them out of my inbox. I keep it flagged so I know it's something I need to work on. So when you start with your email in professional life, it may take you some time to decide, do you want to make a folder for every project? Do you want to have subfolders under that project? Do you prefer to have a folder that just says active projects? Or do you prefer to have a folder that says things to do and move important things into that folder? Whatever works for you, don't feel bad. Everybody's a little bit different, but you do need to find some form of organization that does work for you, whether it be flagging or putting things in folders or color coding. Spend some time experimenting, and don't go for your first 6 months without trying a different organizational system, because the emails will come in and you'll want to have a way to keep them organized and keep track of what you're working on and who you're communicating with. As far as setting time to look at your email inbox, I did want to mention to everybody that I recommend setting aside time, perhaps first thing in the morning, maybe after lunch, and then at the end of the day to keep an eye on your email to see what's coming in, scan those subject lines, see what's important and requires an immediate response or an urgent response. But don't keep your email open all day unless you absolutely have to. It can be pretty distracting. I'm sure y'all are familiar with this concept. Using social media and text messages on your phone, you're getting pings and notifications. And sometimes you have to turn those off because they're distracting you from your work at hand. So having your email inbox open all day can also distract from the work that you're doing at your professional job. So don't feel obligated to be checking emails every single hour on the hour. If you can do it 3 times a day, I think that's a great point for a professional. Okay, I'm going to turn this next slide over to Mike.
Sounds good. Let me make sure I'm unmuted. All right, so that is the end of the email etiquette portion of this presentation. Now we just kind of want to tell you a little bit more about Texas, ASCE Texas section, for those of you who may not already know this. So the Texas section represents about 10,000 members of ASCE who live within Texas. We've got 15 branches all across Texas. There are student chapters at most of the major universities across the state, which you are members of. And ASCE also belongs to Region 6, which is Texas, New Mexico, Oklahoma, and then Mexico. Next slide, please. On the next slide, we'll kind of go through the Texas section's main programs, the things that we do on a regular basis. The second one down there, you might have heard of, the ASCE Texas Student Symposium. You're at the 2021 version of that right now. CCon is a similar event, more for professional continuing education, professional development. It's 3 days full of breakout sessions, keynote sessions, all different types of topics across civil engineering disciplines. And that is in September. Save the date for that. I believe this year it's September 15 to 17, 2021. We also have the Texas Legislative Drive-In. That happens every other year during the legislative session. Members from the Texas section are led by our Government Affairs Committee, and it's usually a 2-day in-person event where there's a training on sort of how to speak with your legislature, your members of the legislature, how to pitch your ideas, what ASCE's talking points are, what they want you to sort of tell your elected officials and try to help them get done. And then the second day, everybody sort of descends upon the Capitol. All the meetings are scheduled. People are dropping in with elected officials all over the building from all across the state. It's actually a pretty cool event and a unique way to make your mark on civil engineering. Sort of along with that is the infrastructure report card. This is an every 4 years initiative where a team of, I think it's 30 to 50 members, it varies, goes through different infrastructure categories and they assess the condition. It's done in Texas, it's done in other states. ASCE also releases a similar infrastructure report card for the whole country. And doing it every 4 years sort of allows different states to compare where they're at over time and see where investment is needed in certain areas of infrastructure. And then we have our,
I'm going to chime in real quick. I just want to congratulate all the group for guessing correctly that the Texas 2021 report card gave Texas infrastructure a C. So everybody got that right. So thanks for tuning into the report card.
nice. And then we have our Texas Civil Engineer, which is our magazine. You can find that, it's actually an online magazine. You can find that through our website now. Articles are coming out in that regularly. There's technical features, there's articles about our student chapters and branches and some of the leaders in the Texas section. I would definitely encourage you to go find that, check it out. You can also sign up to get regular emails with the new articles. And then lastly, we have our Leadership Development Weekend for you students. This could be down the road for you if you decide to get involved with a branch or a committee, which we would very much encourage and hope you do. Leadership Development Weekend is every summer. We get our leaders in the Texas section together for a weekend of fun activities, some leadership training, some networking, just kind of catching up. We try to do that every summer. And then there at the bottom is a link to our website. Please go check it out. Please bookmark it and check it out on the regular. Thank you.
Thank you, Mike. All right, well, that concludes our email etiquette presentation and of course our shameless plug for being involved in ASCE. We can't say enough good things about ASCE. We're happy to take questions at this time. I know we put a lot of information out there for you all about using emails and being as professional as possible in your workplace communications. All of the sessions for the symposium are being recorded and they will be available on our YouTube channel in a couple of weeks. So if you wanted to go back and reference something, you're more than welcome to. And of course, Mike and I are available to answer questions even after today.
I believe everyone's probably busy right now setting up their signature blocks for their emails. As we
I sure hope so.
Lindsay, I know your Outlook inbox puts mine to shame. I was a little bit jealous of all the color coding and
it's just it's what works for me, and I know everybody does things differently, and so I don't want to say like, yes, you have to use color codes and flagging, but you do have to think about a process for keeping yourself organized.
very good advice.
Okay, well, if there's no questions, you can find Mike and I in the app. We're on there. You can send us a direct message. You can send us an email anytime at the Texas Section office. You can find us at the Texas Section website. I put a couple links in there for everybody. And we can conclude and go on to the next session for students today.
Hopefully we'll see everyone, all the students here at the R. John Craig Legacy event, and a reminder that there is a link to vote for your favorite video in the Attendify app as well for that session. There is a question actually that came up in the chat. I have a question referring to someone at an email. If the office is comfortable addressing other people with their first name, should a new young member use the first name as well?
A really great question. You know, every office is a little bit different, but I would say if you've never corresponded with somebody before and you are the junior employee and they're more senior than you, I would be a little bit more formal. Mr. Smith, Mrs. Smith, Dr. Smith, and then they can let you know, hey, you know what, it's fine, you should just call me John. That's not a problem, or call me Jane. But I would err on the side of caution and be more formal in my first communication with that coworker, especially if they're senior to me. But after that, if they're comfortable with going by their first name, that's not a problem. All right, well, thanks for the question. We appreciate it, Adolfo.
All right, and I believe with that, maybe we can end the session and give people a few minutes break before we head into the next R. John Craig Legacy event.
Okay, I will stop the recording.